Um, we are gathered here to discuss issues related to COVID-19 and urban planning. We all know that the COVID-19 pandemic has posed a major challenge to the entire world, a very unprecedented one, for that matter. In fact, it has highlighted, among other issues, the importance of safe distancing in cities. It also highlights the fact that health is a key consideration for city planning. Many cities face health threats linked to urban and territorial planning. Diseases have thrived in overcrowded cities or where there's inadequate to clean water, sanitation, and hygienic facilities. In fact, it can be argued that a purpose for urban planning is for human health. I want to believe our health experts will want to attest to this argument. So with this few words, I welcome you to this meeting today. It will take us about a couple of hours, and we are going to have some distinguished speakers. We are going to speak for 10 minutes each, and we're going to strictly monitor the time because we have to get this done, and other people do other things they want to do. So we'll start by town planner Waheed Kadiri. Town planner Kadiri was trained in the Nigeria and in the United Kingdom. He has been to 3 tertiary institutions in Nigeria and the UK. He was adjudged the best student in his set in each of them. He has a postgraduate qualification in transportation management. He has over 42 years post-qualification experience in varied areas of urban and regional practice, public, private, and the academics. He started his career in an urban planning consulting firm and later moved into academics at the Moshood Abiola Polytechnic, Abeokuta in Ogun State, where he had held different positions, culminating his appointment as rector for 8 years and a chief lecturer in the Department of Urban Regional Planning. He retired from the service of the Polytechnic in February 2020. Hello, yeah, sorry about that. I lost connection. I was telling everyone about CPL Waheed Kadiri. Town planner Waheed Kadiri is a principal partner at Waheed Kadiri Associates Limited, a consulting firm in urban, regional, and transportation planning and planning advocacy. He manages, along with some colleagues, an NGO called Center for Environmental Studies and Design, which focuses on advocacy, proper planning, and sustainable development and training of professionals transiting from planning schools into the industry. He was the district governor, Lions Club International District 404B1, chairman, Ogun State chapter of the NITP and APBN, Ogun State chapter. He's also the chairman, board of trustees of the Association of Town Planning Consultants of Nigeria. I welcome you, sir, to take the floor. Town Planner Waid Kadiri, for your keynote address, sir. Can you hear me, sir?
Thank you. So, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear
Can
you,
you hear
sir.
me? All right. I would like to share my screen, please.
Okay, sir. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you so much. I think my 10 minutes starts now. The title of my keynote address is COVID-19 Urban Planning, Issues and Challenges, New Normal and Pathway. As a form of introduction, I'm just adopting ISOCAP's position, that is International Society of City and Regional Planning, on the COVID-19 pandemic, which they said marked the year 2020 with one of the biggest public health crises of all times. Threatening to take away millions of lives, it is poised to instigate a massive economic crisis, triggering a further negative consequences for human life, well-being, and lifestyle. ASUCAP also says that the pandemic is evolving into an urban crisis, forcing us to reconsider our deeply held beliefs about good city form and the purpose of planning. We face a time of unprecedented change and uncertainty. Now, the challenge posed to town planners from my own point of view about three. There's the issue of density, the issue of governance, and lifestyle. I hope I'm being heard.
Yes.
Hello? Thank you. When we talk about density, the impression you first get is about how many people are living in a defined unit of area. And we tend to have this attitude that the lower the density, the better the space that you want to give to it. And therefore, high density areas are usually in more vulnerable areas of the city, or even in a planned area. You look at areas that are less vulnerable and you assign low density to that place. But one thing that, a perception that we want us to change is that high density plot it's not the same as high density building. That you have a plot located in a high density area does not mean that the buildings therein might be of high density. And also that high density buildings is not the same as overcrowding. We need to look at overcrowding as being different from high density living areas. But the issue is that when we even accept that, what about the public spaces? They can be overcrowded. Let's say bus stops, for example. Let's take churches, mosques, and all that. They can be overcrowded. That is, they are used beyond their capacity. However, while we are talking about density or whatever, we should also pay attention to informal communities. These are communities that just, hello? attention to informal communities because they are one located in vulnerable areas that are unorganized or disorganized. And accessibility to them is very tedious. And in time of pandemics like this, even getting access to anybody who needs attention is a big problem. And therefore, we are saying planning standards uh, must promote livability. That should be the focus, not about density per se, not density absolutely. Now let's talk about governance. Let's look at local governments. It's supposed to be at the grassroots. They are supposed to touch the life of the people the most. But then, since the pandemic started, I'm talking about Nigeria that I know of, or even let's say Lagos and Ogun State. Are there community level responses? No. We have response centers that are located disproportionately away from the largest set of people, and even getting to be tested is even a big problem. Then let's look at healthy lifestyle. People with underlying health problems are more prone to suffer COVID-19 related mortality. And the funny thing about this is that it's those people who live in what we can call better spaces that have these underlying health problems the more: high blood pressure, sugar content in the body and all that. However, one thing we should know is that city life promotes non-communicable diseases such as obesity, heart disease, pulmonary diseases, and therefore we must do something about that, which I will take up later. And while people in city, the better spaces in city have non-communicable diseases, those in the poorer environment are prone to communicable diseases arising from waterborne diseases and poor sanitation, and they are left on their own. Now, let's try to do all this within the 10 minutes. And now, understanding the new normal, city resilience, and the imperative of urban planning. No, the question we want to ask ourselves is, what do we stand for as professionals? What are we ready to give to the society? What should the society expect from us? Should we be pushed before we act, or we can act voluntarily? Now, about COVID-19, pandemic has shown that professionals should discuss their silo mentality so as to meet the challenges posed to healthcare. And we don't want to leave that to just the public health people. It should be the concern of everyone, from architecture to planning to engineering. And the issue of basic amenities also should be the concern of all professionals. Now, when we talk about transportation, that should also be a concern. When we talk about transportation, the tendency is that we make plans for motor vehicles rather than for people. We should move back towards that and see the people as a reason why transportation amenities are needed. And technological advancement, we cannot afford to stay where we are. We should be moving in the direction of technology, because it helps us, it puts people in touch with each other, like this meeting we are holding now. If not for technology, we won't be able to do that. We should look at technology and see how it can help us to solve some of the urban problems and so on. In transportation, is being used, Uber, before now, the Go-Kada and all that. But There's so many other things you can use technology for. We should also look at the psychological and social and physiological needs of people. Psychological in the sense that, are they happy doing what they are doing? Are they happy with what the city gives them? Physiological in the sense that, are they able to exercise themselves? Are we not depending too much on motorized vehicle instead of giving prominence to non-motorized vehicle? I'm focusing here in the next 2 minutes on resilience, and I'm looking at SDG 11, which is supposed to make cities and human settlements inclusive, safe, resilient, and sustainable. The way we look at this now, resilience is about the ability of individuals and systems to retain their structure and ways of functioning in times of crisis and after. We've been able to do that as far as natural disasters are concerned, especially flood, earthquakes, and all that. But nobody has ever thought of pandemics like we are finding ourselves in today. Therefore, we have to find a way to go back to that. Today, resilience tends to be applied to efforts aimed at preventing the occurrence of and reducing the consequences of a range of shocks and stresses. What are shocks? Shocks are sudden events, fire outbreaks, earthquakes, floods. But we can say the pandemic is a shock too, because it came upon us that something like this could happen. It has been the history that maybe 1890 something, there was something like that. They've never got anything as great as what we are having now, even with the level of technology and all that. Whereas stress occurrences that occur on a daily and recurring basis, but with long-term impact of weakening the system, but which makes the possibility of shocks possible. Let's take waste management, for example. Accumulation of waste will take time, but the negative impact can be shocking. It could be a big problem to our health. Let's even talk about inefficient transportation. When people spend about 6 hours to get to work for only 8 hours, and you get back home and you sleep for just 5 hours and you are up again the next morning, you cannot be at optimum with that. Then overpopulation, high employment, unemployment, I want to say here, and opaque governance. Governance is not as transparent as it should be, and that is why some people in this country believe even the pandemic, the way it is being touted, is just a way for some people to make some money, especially those in government. Now, let's look at what resilient cities are, and because that's my focus. Capacity of individual communities, institutions, businesses, and systems within a city to survive, adapt, and grow no matter what kinds of chronic stress and acute shocks they experience. Therefore, we expect that if you say the pandemic is a shock, we should be able to get over it. The effects of the pandemic started as a shock that shook the very fabric of the city by stopping all group and highly dense activities associated with thriving city life. City is supposed to give the best to everyone. It's even supposed to be the engine of growth. And in trying to achieve this, people must congregate. But the pandemic is, we are saying social distance or physical distance or whatever. The number of people should be limited to 2050 or thereabouts. Are you hearing me, please?
Yes, sir, we can hear you.
Hello? All right, thank you so much.
I can hear you, sir.
All right, thank you. The institution of lockdown silenced the thronging bus of schools, markets, and entertainment in the city. And if you cannot get that, what's the difference between you and the man who is living in the rural in the rural village, if you cannot get together with people, you don't get to the entertainment hotspots and all that. And over time, it is now becoming a threat that has weakened the economic fabric of most cities, increased the vulnerability of people to loss of livelihoods and associated issues on how they get by. The speed at economic shock waves as hit developing countries is dramatic, even in comparison to the 2008 Secretary General of UNCTAD. He said that the economic fallout from the shock is ongoing and increasingly difficult to predict, but there are clear indications that things will get much worse for developing countries' economies before they get better. Now, if we want to get better, let's just look at those qualities that we need to look for or we need to provide for a resilient city. It must be integrated, it must be inclusive, the city must be resourceful, reflective, robust, redundant, and flexible. I've tried to, in the table on the screen, I've tried to look at each of these qualities and see the physical planning imperative. For a city to be integrated, it means the systems must work together. The city must be physically connected and transportation clearly defined with hierarchies up to the neighborhood level to improve economy and emergency response system. For a city to be inclusive, planners or professionals should look at co-production in the planning process. Planners must work with communities seeking workable solutions, that is the youth, the women, people living with disabilities, people in low informal sector. And it must, for it to be resourceful, there must also be co-production in the planning process. For a city to be reflective, for us to make a city reflective, you must challenge our master plan approach, hitherto, which is rigid. Need for monitoring and review of development plans is also necessary. For a city to be robust, it must have limits to system failure. It must have well-conceived, constructed, and managed physical assets so that they can withstand impacts of shocks. What's the planning imperative? Space allocation, but also discouraging over-reliance on a single asset, recreation. Then redundancy. What do you mean by redundancy? This provision of backup capacity. We should look at certain facilities and ask ourselves, when the ships are down, do we need excess of this? Or can we have what is called conjunctive use? Can we use a space for two different uses? That have been done in Onikon Stadium in Lagos as the COVID-19 isolation center. It used to be a football stadium, but the space is there. And the necessity now is to use it for other purposes. Therefore, we have to have accessibility in terms of road network in communities, facilitate emergency services. Flexibility, there must be alternative strategies. We don't have to say one solution. And that's the beauty of planning. There should be alternatives. There should be alternative strategies that could change system, introduction of new knowledge, including imperatives that planning should be responsive and participatory, moving away from the rigidity associated with master plans. Let me just conclude by saying this way forward. The imperatives of urban planning and planners for bringing cities to a pandemic resilience future in this period can be summarized in one word, that is agility. And agility is about being nimble, being brisk, and all that. If you're agile, you have ability to respond to issues. We need to ensure that we set up processes for ensuring that every facet of our profession works in an integrated, inclusive way. We should design or design with inclusiveness, flexibility, and robustness in mind. We should promote alternative uses, that is, make way for redundancy and responses. We need to ensure that we can replan overshift in a more urgent fashion to ensure that in the long term, people are not trapped in their cities, and they must go out. They travel in a relatively healthy and less risky way. We must also ensure that deploy supporting technologies to ensure rapid early response systems to control emerging infections. Let me end by quoting this from ISOCAP as I did at the beginning. And it says, during the pandemic, we need to adjust our role as planners. But most importantly, we need to examine the urban planning agenda in the post-COVID-19 world. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you for that very enlightening presentation there. I said agility is what we need as planners. Even as you underline the imperatives of urban planning for bringing cities to a pandemic resilient future. Thank you for the presentation, sir. We'll go to the next paper, which will be presented by Professor Daniel Inkum. Professor Inkum is the immediate past chair, Association of African Planning Schools. He's also of the Department of Planning, Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology in Kumasi, in Ghana. Professor Inkum, you're welcome to join us, sir.
Thank you.
You're welcome, sir.
Right. I just want to find out if you have my slides.
I don't have the slide. Has the host got the slide? The slide?
Leke, Professor Oduaye.
Professor Oduaye, do you have the slides, sir?
We have difficulty in downloading your slides online, sir. Well, you can continue.
Okay.
Can you share with us there, sir? Can you share from your side?
I'll try and do. I'll try and see if I can share.
Okay.
If I'm not able, then I'll just make it available after the presentation.
All right, sir.
Okay, sir.
Okay.
You have 10 minutes, sir.
All right. I'll try and go within the limit of 10 minutes because other speakers will have to speak. First of all, thank you very much for this invitation to speak to you. I feel it's a big privilege to share with you. Thank you, Professor Duaye, for the invitation. I'm going to share a few things with you in the next 10 minutes. I hope I'll be able to do that. My presentation is going to follow 3 key points. First of all, what we know about COVID-19, the key issues for consideration in urban planning, summary, and conclusions. Let me go straight to what the World Health Organization is saying. As at 14th July 2020, that is yesterday, we had 12.9 million confirmed cases of COVID, 572,288 confirmed deaths, and we are also told by the World Health Organization that 216 countries, areas, or territories have cases of COVID. Now, because I'm not medical personnel. I'll leave the medical issues to those who are competent to speak about. But I want to speak about 6 key issues that I think concern us as urban planners. The first one is the concept of uncertainty. And that is to say that there's a lot that we know, but much more that we do not know about COVID. The second point I want to make is that of space. And that is to say that the pandemic is spreading and that it is going to be with us for some time, and it will cover a lot of our space as we know it. The third point that I want to make is evidence, and I'm going to expand on these. That is to say that we can use available evidence to take decisions concerning the pandemic as urban planners. Then the next thing I will speak about is leadership. As we hear about the pandemic, we see how leadership has made a difference in many of the countries of the world. And there appears to be a positive correlation between leadership and the spread of the virus. The next point is collaboration. And I think collaboration is key in responding to the issues posed by the pandemic. Collaboration among nations, collaboration among institutions, collaboration among peoples of the world, and collaboration among various disciplines, including medicine, sociology, urban planning, governance, etc. And the final issue I'll dwell on is opportunity. I think that COVID-19 provides the world an opportunity to build, and not only to build, but to build better. Now, let me now take the 6 issues and talk to them one after the other. Uncertainty. I'm going to talk about uncertainty.
Please, you can kindly unmute yourself. Unmute yourself, please. Unmute yourself, sir.
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Are you referring to me?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you, sir. You can continue.
Okay. So I was talking about the issue of space, the issues that we need to deal with. And I was on uncertainty. We said that because of the fact that there are many uncertainties in urban planning and also the issues of the pandemic, we should ensure that we plan with alternatives and with different horizons, the short, medium, and long term. The next thing that I will speak about is space. We know that COVID-19 has impacted urban more than rural areas, and most of our planning schemes have spatial manifestations. What we need to do is to focus on cities as a means of growth and development. And cities should be for multiple communities. That is, we should apply the principle of inclusion. And as Town Planner Kadri said, we should also pay attention to density in the cities in terms of ability to maintain personal space. And here, I think the key issue is occupancy rather than city densities per se. And then in terms of space, the identity and connectedness in space is crucial in urban planning. The next issue I'll talk about is evidence. I think that most of us continue to hear the news that our actions in response to COVID-19 should be evidence-based. And I think this speaks to urban planning. Now, the urban planning should be evidence-based. We should be interested in the lived experiences of people. We should use data collected from a wide array of stakeholders to inform urban planning and listen and appreciate the priorities of people. In other words, our planning should be people-centered, and it should help us to discover the discovery of common interests. The next issue is leadership. And COVID-19, as I said, has highlighted the role of leadership in times of crisis. Planning institutions, as many of us find ourselves, must train the next generation of planners who are not only planning, but are also leading, facilitating, communicating, and are people-centered. The leadership must build networks at all levels of society in order to respond to issues at different levels. And I think Town Planner Kadri mentioned the fact that even though there might be national responses, there should also be federal and local level responses. And in Ghana, for instance, we should talk about the regions as well as the districts. So that's about leadership. The next issue I think is important for us is collaboration. COVID-19 has highlighted the notion of a global village. We all live in a global village, and collaboration should be across nations and across professions. We should build leadership and networks at all levels of society in order to respond to the different scales of the problem that we find ourselves. Finally, I want to talk about opportunity. I think we should use as planners the pandemic to build back our cities better. In fact, the World Resources Institute says that a return to the normal will be a failure for urban planning. And in so saying, I would want to just cite 4 examples of what history and opportunity can teach us. In the 17th century, to offset the threat of pestilence, London replaced older wooden structures with bricks. And that's why when you go to the UK today, you see a lot of brickwork, believed to be much more impervious to the disease-carrying vermin. Again, in 19th century Paris, the city authorities decided to widen its boulevards and streets to improve sanitation and health. When you take the case of New York, massive investments went into sewer and sanitation systems, expansion of parks and green spaces, and the development of building codes in order to fight infectious diseases like tuberculosis, cholera, etc., etc. And lastly, if you look at the Spanish flu, what happened was that in many homes, there was the introduction of what we call the powder rooms, so that people will have a place to wash their hands to avoid carrying germs into the upstairs living quarters. So as urban planners, what am I saying? My conclusion is that every situation is an opportunity. COVID-19 presents to us an opportunity that will help us to improve our planning, to improve the way we connect with people, especially the vulnerable and the disadvantaged in societies, and an opportunity for us to do things differently. And I believe that when we do that, urban planning would have contributed to the development of society. Thank you very much.
Hello, thank you very much, sir, for that interesting presentation. Those were very interesting points to raise there, sir. We talked about space, the evidence, leadership, and some very interesting things, collaboration, opportunities. Some very points we need to note as urban planners, most especially in this pandemic situation. We'll go to, thank you very much, sir. We'll go to our next presentation, and that will be by
Thank you very much.
Hello, Champlain Adeoye was the former director in the Lagos State Public Service, where he retired as permanent secretary about 5 years ago. I'm not true. I want to let the world know exactly who you are, sir. I hope you don't mind.
Yes.
He's currently the Chief Executive Officer of Urban Planning Smart Solutions Limited, a company he incorporated to engage practice, both public and private sector practice. His interest spans development, planning, and administration. He is currently the chairman of the Lagos State Physical Planning and Building Control Appeals Committee, a statutory quasi-judicial body put together by the Lagos State government to adjudicate in disputes arising from infractions related to physical planning and building control in Lagos State. Was the former national secretary of the NITP and currently the national legal advisor. If that physical planning should be in order to achieve constituting the needs of the city. So you're welcome, sir. Take the floor, sir.
Thank you very much. I want to use the opportunity to thank the organizers, particularly Prof, for inviting me to this discussion. Initially, I thought I may not be able to have my slides shared, but later I discovered that I can put some things down. Having said that, I will go straight because my job has been reduced by the first two speakers who had graciously looked at the issues at the introductory level. Particularly, I don't need to bother myself much to start telling stories about the pandemic that is ravaging us. And again, probably before I move on, I want to apologize if I have a background noise of alternative power here. I had to change the source of the power, so I don't know if it's not really disturbing. But to go straight to the issue, the point is that we are having a ravaging pandemic attacking our health and our economic well-being, and it's a global one. But this has also given us what I will call the opportunity to look at the ways we live, the way we work, play, and even interacting. And that I see as a positive trend in these affairs of pandemic, in spite of all the uncertainties, all the fears, all the decisions. I look at it as giving us some opportunity. We all know that urban planning is the technical and the political process that will let us achieve the improvement in the living condition of the people, particularly within the built environment. We have been told, particularly that this pandemic is more prevalent in the urban areas than the rural or the hinterland. And for this, I'm looking at it from the fact that the cities, we all know, is an engine of economic development, And the fact remains that over 55%, of the world population today resides in the cities. And we are talking also of about 4.2 billion generating the GDP of the whole world. And in that wise, we need to focus very much on what is happening in the cities. And in the cities, we also know that about 828 million, according to the UN UN figures, about 828 people are now living in slums. So, talking about resilience in this post-COVID cities, I'm looking at 3 areas of concern: the slums, the housing condition, and also looking at how they interrelate, particularly within the space, which has been emphasized as critical to the moving forward in a post-COVID environment. So what I will do is to look at some critical areas because of time, and those critical areas in the city, when we are now moving forward in this post-COVID urban planning, is to look at how do we assess the core services. How do we assess the core services? We all know that people come to the cities not just to sleep and reside there. They want to get services. And if they have been getting the services in the hinterland, in the rural areas, maybe the pressure on the cities could have been reduced. But the imagined situation now is that the services that are much required with lockdown, with social distancing, we are being challenged that these central services, which makes the city more relevant, the urban planners will have to rethink the way we plan the cities in that area. And how do I mean? It's always better to really plan a city that will give you the essential service of energy, water, and other social infrastructure. But we are now being challenged to really look at it again. And again, I look at affordable housing and public space. And this is very, very important to us post-COVID. Either to this, we just view the slum areas as just informal, and we can as well treat them with probably a kind of arm's length distance. But now we are being given a wake-up call to change our attitude, because this is where our efforts should go now to really be able to have affordable housing and secured. We all see what happened, particularly during the lockdown. They cannot bear it anymore. They don't have the regular sources of income, is daily, and you have to ask them to stay at home. Meanwhile, we don't have social security for all these people. And that means that we need to now re-examine the old, what I call the old conventional way of doing things, and the new normal. And that is also very important. Our planning regulations prior to this time is conventional. And we have to now look at how we are going to make the planning regulation more dynamic. Somebody has already alluded to that. We don't need rigid way of zoning, rigid ways of enforcing some of these regulations. We have to revisit to make them more flexible. And one of the principles is also guaranteeing the autonomy of future cities. What do I mean? We really have to make our cities the planning needs such that mixed use development will be the new normal of working, playing, and also living. And that means we have to go back to the drawing board, retrofitting some of the available facilities and making sure that nothing stops a consultant from having his office within his residence and some other work from home businesses. So the new thinking also will have to focus on the way we can address the density, making sure that the production is done very near or close to where the consumption is. So the effect of the over-optimized supply chain was felt to the extent that even United States and Japan are now even thinking of relocating. So we need to start looking at how we can spread some of the production into where the consumption will take place. And then we can also be adopting new normal of planning into the work from home concept now, which everybody is trying to adjust to really be able to follow. Beside that, there is also the fact, what I call the functional autonomy, which I mentioned earlier. And rather than looking for mass transit, can we be talking of walkable and multiple lightweight mode because of the safety in the mass transit? That should be the concern of urban planner and transport planning people. What do I mean? There are a lot of innovations coming up from the use of transport, and accessibility is very, very essential to city economic, to core area for economic prosperity. If the cities are not accessible, particularly the slum areas, which is a challenge now, it means we may also have to revisit that area. And the small businesses, which hitherto we have been concerned, but we just look at it. In this part of the world, informal activities are very, very important, and we have to really plan around that area to make our cities resilient. And I talk about integrated green and blue spaces. Somebody has already alluded
to. Time is up, sir. Kindly round up, sir.
Yes, alluded to spaces, and again, data. And that data can be sourced from community, from other groups, which can be made available rather than putting them in silos. We have to recycle it. But it's very important for us to, as planners, to go and study the new economic sustainability plan, national economic sustainability plan, that we have a lot of funds to really achieve much, particularly in the slum areas by federal government. Over 2.3 trillion is available, and we have to key in particularly improvement of slum areas and affordable housing. These are just a few areas that we need to bring to bear in that area. And finally, I just want us to know that not all is evil about COVID-19. We have a lot of opportunities now, if only our government could seize that opportunity. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir. I agree with you, sir. There are a lot of opportunities emerging from, even from this seemingly pathetic situation that we are in. You made a lot of points which I agree with. I've a lot of people say that pandemic is more prevalent in the cities than the hinterland. Yes, the cities are more densely populated, but has there been any study that would show that there's more impact? Because I believe personally that there hasn't been much detailed study to back that statement up. That notwithstanding, we'll go to the next speaker. Our next speaker is Professor Mrs. Okuenebo Owe, the fellow of the Institute. She's the Deputy Vice Chancellor, Academics of the River State University, River State. Thank you, Madam.
Thank you very much. Yes,
you have 10 minutes.
Yes, I know. I want to talk on COVID-19 and urban planning, and specifically as it applies to informal settlements. And well, we have so many definitions of informal settlements. I don't need to bore you with that, but with the impression we have very often in this country, even in government, even with town planners, describing informal settlements in such terms as slums, squatter settlements, marginal settlements, is derogatory, and it fails to convey the fact that informal settlements are human settlements, and that they provide the bulk of housing for low-income people in our cities. And if you look at the statistics, it's terrible that over 79% of our population live in such settlements. And the data that we have on informal settlements tell us that they are essentially an urban problem, and they lack all kinds of basic services, and that the COVID-19 pandemic has brought out, I'm talking of Nigeria especially, our unpreparedness in the face of the spatial, demographic, cultural, social, economic, and environmental challenges associated with urbanization. And the UN Habitat has observed that informal settlements will be the most devastated because of the status in which they live. And we can identify health impacts, livelihood impacts, security and safety impacts, and social impacts. The protocol proffered by experts, NCDC, in Nigeria and abroad, are basically you maintain social physical distance, you wash your hands frequently with soap, you self-isolate if you feel ill, you minimize your physical contact and movements, and you try to maintain environmental hygiene. This protocol in itself presents very important challenges for those who live in informal sectors, in settlements. Social distancing is almost impossible in the overcrowded condition in which the people in informal settlements live. Often you have one household, sometimes between 5 and 7 persons living in one room, and that room doubles up as the kitchen, as the bedroom, as the parlor. Toilets and bathrooms where they are available are shared. Access to potable water is very poor. And informal settlements, most households buy water as public supply systems are absent. And when you look at that and you look at their import self-isolation also is simply not possible. In fact, the coping strategy in informal settlements come from the ability to socialize. And when you say self-isolate, you take away the strength of the coping strategy. You expose them more to vulnerability. Now, when we talk about urban resilience, these coping strategies are part of it. In fact, they are the lifeline of people in the informal settlements. And then, of course, within the informal settlement, you see the utmost lack of awareness of the seriousness of the pandemic. And when you couple this with poverty and superstition, you can see why they are so resistant to some of our orders. Well, I have some data later on for those who are interested in looking at the task that is before a national and state governments in this country if we really want to go talk about improved housing. But as the DG of the World Health Organization has said, there will be no return to the old normal for the foreseeable future, because this sickness is here. Every day there's something new about it. The etiology keeps changing, and the reactions across the world keep changing. Today you hear this, tomorrow you hear that. Now, what are our pathways? We must, the new normal is simple. We have reduced physical interactions. We have reduced movement between and within neighborhoods and across cities. We've reduced the movement of goods. Supply chains are disrupted. There is increase in cost of goods and foods. There's also change in perception of what is culturally acceptable regarding community-based activities, such as weddings, burials, and entertainment activities. Every state has given guidelines for these activities to take place. Environmental sanitation, personal hygiene is now regarded as a safety measure. And we have moved from communal living as a people to living as single households. What are the pathways I'm looking at? We must, as planners, manage urban growth, because government and its agencies have not been in control of the growth dynamics in our urban centers. In fact, the very existence and continued expansion of informal settlements attests to this fact. There must be ways of bringing order deliberately into our urban centers for the immediate and long-term future of these cities. We must provide adequate and planned spaces for informal sector activities in urban areas. They are not enough, and even when people themselves try to create these spaces, what we see is that they are harassed. And we must, as a profession, ensure discipline and adherence to planning standards in our land use decisions. Infrastructure and services must be provided within the context of physical plans. You don't just get up one day and say, we're going to put 20 boreholes, and we're going to do this, and you just go around distributing them. It must be within the plan that exists for the city. And physical planning provides the framework for good urban governance, where all stakeholders are involved in the decision-making process. People living in informal settlements constitute a challenge, yes, but they also constitute great opportunity. If I go by the experience of the waterfront settlements in Port Harcourt, they have managed to set up community development committees. And these committees should be the front line for whatever government wants to do in these communities. Now, the COVID-19 pandemic has highlighted the yawning distance between the urban poor and government. And there is need to bridge this gap through programs that meet their immediate need, such as water supply, waste management, and public health interventions. There are no clinics, but there's no reason why there can be no mobile clinics or health posts during this time of the pandemic. If anything, it will help to engender some trust in government. The water supply system is just not there. There is no reason why in this very short time, there can be no public water supply in those places. Places where they don't have to spend money to buy water, but they can get water. Of course, we have to think also of the security of tenure, because some informal settlement dwellers may be in position to improve their structures. But because they don't have the security of tenure, they are not willing to do that. So the entire place is run down and is degraded. Of course, we have our policy, which we have never really implemented the National Urban Development Policy 2006, where it was said that the government will promote and encourage the development of strategic plans for urban renewal in every urban local government of the country. There are programs which Nigeria is a signatory to. The Sustainable Development Goals of 2015, the UN Sustainable Development Goals, we are part of it. And goal number 11 says we should make Nigerian cities inclusive, safe, resilient, and sustainable. We can't do that without the informal sectors. The informal settlements harbor the people who drive the informal sector activities in the cities. That drives the urban economy. And growth in informal economic activities is driven by rural urban migration, continued loss of jobs, rising unemployment. We must recognize the importance of this sector and build on the potential. Now, in the context of physical planning, we have to begin to look at our neighborhood more or less as both production and consumption units. Because one of the problems that we faced during the lockdown is that even within your neighborhood, where you can stretch your leg maybe in the evening, you couldn't get some services. And for the informal sector, that's not possible. Because if they don't move out, they have nothing to eat. And that is why we are breaking all the rules during the lockdown. You say there are no markets. They have the market in the middle of the night from 2 a.m. to 4 a.m. And they sell because they must sell in order to eat. A lot of the people that live in informal sector produce goods and services which they must sell, and they must move out to do that. Of course, we must improve on the adaptive and resilient capacity of the vulnerable population, which are found mostly in informal settlements. We must, as resilience in our cities. The most ridiculous part of the problems that informal sector residents had during the pandemic is they were playing a hide and seek game with government agencies. If you say, don't go here, they find another place to locate, simply because they had to eat. And that was the most difficult aspect of the lockdown for many of them. There are many impacts of the lockdown. The health impacts were there. The social impacts were there. But the livelihood impact was for informal sector activities. And that is where, as planners, we must put some effort in seeing that we make serious improvements. In many urban centers, the open market was closed down during the period. There was nowhere for them to sell or buy. There was nowhere for them to offer their services, which they do by the roadsides, vulcanizers and such people. So that was a big problem for them. So the informal sector must begin to take the important place that it should in our urban centers, and planners should drive that process. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam, for that very interesting presentation. You've focused a lot on the informal sector, who are, of course, faced with a lot of challenges. You said that the pandemic has brought about brought up Nigeria's unpreparedness.
Yes.
Especially in terms of urban challenges, we are very unprepared when it comes to that. That is, this pandemic made it so obvious and very embarrassing to the government. And you said that social distances is virtually impossible in the informal settlements.
Yes.
Self-isolation is not. It's not just possible because of the way they live, and the lack of awareness. And then the pandemic has highlighted the distance between the poor and the government. A lot of it needs to be that gap needs to be bridged urgently. Thank you very much for your presentation, Madam. We shall address it further during the question and answer session. The next paper. Thank you, Madam. Will be presented by Professor Leke Oduwaye. Professor Oduwaye is a fellow of the Institute. He's of the Department of Urban and Regional Planning of the University of Lagos, where he used to be the Dean at the Faculty of Environmental Science. Professor Oduwaye, you have the floor, sir. Hello?
Yeah, okay.
You have 10 minutes, sir.
Hello?
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah, okay. Thank you very much. I'm really very happy to be here. I've been following the program. My presentation will still be on a global theme of the meeting, which is on COVID-19 and urban planning. You know, over 50% of the human population actually live in urban areas, and coincidentally, the urban areas occupy just about 3% of the global Earth. Whereas we have the population of the world to be about 7.8 billion people, and just about 10% of the Earth is actually built up. And this is a real challenge. It means that large population, which is about half, occupied just about 3%. And that's a very big challenge when you have emergencies. And to really resolve emergency problems is a matter of infrastructure, what we have in place, infrastructure services. And that is the beauty of urbanization. And currently, from literature, what we have is that we have just about 25% of the infrastructural need for human beings to live livable and be very comfortable. So we are 75% deficient. That is globally. It is even much more serious in developing countries. Now that we have COVID-19, that actually reflected in what really happened when the pandemic issue actually occurred, that many countries were not prepared. Fine, we are not prepared, but are we even half prepared in terms of what we have in place? That is looking at it from mere environmental health, mere infrastructures. But then you are now looking into it from the urban planning point of view. Then it becomes much more critical and very serious, especially in developing countries like Nigeria, where we have not really given urban planning the pride of place that it deserves. Because urban areas are potential areas where government can really make money. That's where we make major taxes and make major money. We have the best brains that can actually contribute to the development of different parts of the world or cities or countries where they are located. So there is need to give priority to urban planning in order to tackle human development challenges. And that is the essence of this paper. And what this paper is saying is that even though urban areas, they look physical, but they are social spaces. Because the essence of urban planning is to create spaces for people to really carry out their socio-economic and cultural activities. And that is why we have the challenge of COVID-19, that all of a sudden we have to now change our lifestyle, quickly to be able to survive the pandemic through so many means. usually relying on information we can get from the different agencies of government and the federal agencies in charge of COVID-19 emergencies. But what is really critical to urban planning is that it's a major challenge to urban planning, that we need to do more in-depth inquiries in order to find solutions to really combat this pandemic situation. And what I've discovered is that we have bundles of theories, bundles of principles through which we actually handle or solve urban planning. The COVID-19 might be an insight. It's like giving us warning signals that we need to recheck, but we have to really plan in the light of what is the real situation of our environment, of the world. So it's an opportunity for us to rethink and to reinvent planning principles, regulations, and administration. And this is not really new in planning. No, what we have as our planning principles, planning history, planning methodology, especially planning administration in terms of planning laws, they are consequences. They are actually consequences of whatever happens in our environment. That planning will have to evaluate environmental issues, physical issues, geographical issues, the level of technology, the level of development, economic development, and economic situation, social and cultural setting. And this will now form the basis of how we plan different areas of the city. So global COVID-19 has brought us back to the basis that this will remain with us for a very long time, except we are deceiving ourselves. We have been with cholera, we have been with Ebola, we have been with malaria for decades. So if we take it for granted that this thing will just come and go, then normally epidemics and pandemic diseases, they rebound. So we have to be ahead of this situation in such a way that our cities can respond. I used to mention this, especially to students, that is it possible to have an almighty formula on how we plan our cities? It's a major challenge. I don't know whether it's possible. But we have to now be thinking that we need some principles that when we put them to plan cities, maybe at regional level, maybe at the level of development of different regions, either global south, global north, that if you put this principle, the system will work. But COVID-19 is a major challenge to us as planners and people in the urban planning profession. Not talk about the town planners alone and other people in the planning profession, so that we can advance the course of planning through the investigation of the way things are done, since it has been proven that urban areas are the epicenters of the pandemic. I have something on the sources and origin of pandemic diseases, but we don't really have time. But it has been proven through literature that they are usually from animal pathogens. And you know, we have domestic animals, we have wild animals. We have domestic animals like birds, like horses, swines, that many of us live with these animals. And these animals, they have a way of actually affecting our environment in terms of environmental health. And again, if you go through the theory of land economics, we discover that most agricultural practices, if you go into the Ricardo theory of urban land use economics, especially for our day-to-day agricultural needs, they usually locate very close to the city, that is in the area of peri-urban areas. And peri-urban areas, they have very close affinity in terms of human interaction with the city. And this is an area where our government will have to look into that how do we manage very urban areas so that they can really products that they need, yet the animals will be treated so that they don't really infect the urban areas with all these pandemic diseases. The issue of human, I have to skip so many things. The infection in history, I have literature on that. Why I've decided to put this is that so that we don't panic within the planning profession, urban planning profession. Is not new. It's not new. A pandemic disease is not new in human development. So we don't need to panic. It's only that we have to find a way to manage it. And the development of urban planning too came because of the industrial pollution, because of environmental issues, which involves diseases brought by animals and things like that. So we have in history the Black Death as the plague that killed about 2 million people. The plague of Athens, which
Your time is up,
killed
sir.
about a quarter population
Kindly
of
round up, sir.
Athens troops.
Kindly round up.
Now, because of time, the Black Plague is very popular. Cholera, influenza with us, pox, tuberculosis, leprosy. Then the vulnerable groups we all know, we are always giving information on that, the urban poor, the economic activities where we have women clustering, like Professor Uwe just mentioned, the informal sector. But let me go into the issues concerning urban planning. Now, this has shown the weaknesses. I'm not saying urban planning is not doing enough, but urban planning by its nature is like they are prophets. As urban planners or people in urban planning disciplines, it is assumed that we can see into the future. We are like prophets that can prophesy that this is what will happen in the future. So it's a challenge to us that we couldn't see this. Again, do we have the competence to see? That's why we have people specializing in environmental health, monitoring what is happening globally. So it's a challenge to us that we have to re-examine our concepts, our principles, and maybe legislation. But much more importantly is a principle that we have been canvassing for, because it's the strength of the city, which is the concept of the compact city and densification. Because of the economic advantages of densification and compact cities, then the advantages in terms of global warming. But we need to really go into this, re-examine it, and now know how to really adopt it. Then this slide is on the trend of global COVID-19 in Nigeria. I think we have about 33,000 or thereabouts. As of today. However, again, because of time, the major challenges that we now have is that how do we make our cities to be amenable to urban threats, of which environmental health is a major one? Do we have cities that will be like urban villages that can really satisfy itself in terms of health, in terms of agricultural products? So we need to re-examine our cities, then the level of infrastructure. And unfortunately, the way infrastructural facilities is provided in developing countries is so that we put economics into it, the issue of affordability. But we most often forget that the people living in the urban fringe, they have their own advantages. They are the low-income workers, they are the laborers, they are the people that work in the agri sector, on our various farms that will supply the food, yet they can't afford the cost of energy. They can't afford the cost of water consumption. So there should be a way to balance it so that our government, they don't just close their eyes as if the people that are solving the problems in the urban centers, they don't need government subsidy. Then our cultural, there will be cultural reform. The way we do our first marriage. This video is just showing this person is a very popular social, political person, Dele Momodu, who celebrated his birthday recently. All were done through virtual, and we all enjoyed it. And they were even able to repeat it several times on national television. So our cities just have to be resilient to the extent that they should be able to respond to emergencies. And we have to look into this. Specifically, let me just mention specific areas that we need in our day-to-day lives. For example, one can really forecast that in cities, many more people would like to use their personal cars. It means we will need more public vehicles to be on the road because of the social distances, because those vehicles will carry lower number of passengers. It means the cost of intra-city mobility will increase. So that's a very big question on how to really balance it. Again, for social distancing, pedestrian walkways have to be either widened, and we have to provide more, because many people will now prefer to even trek, especially to cover short distances. We have to look into the issue of density. Social distancing will now become a new normal with all of us, that we have to get used to it. Because I can observe that in many parts, in many cities in Nigeria, or many towns, people take this thing for granted as if there will be a miracle that the thing will not happen, or it's not for real. Yeah, that is for real. Then from the design point of view, I could see a situation where people will now be giving briefs to architects to create rooms where they can do their virtual meetings, where they can do virtual work, that is not going to offices, that people might not need to go to their offices 5 days in a week, and yet they will be very, very efficient. So government have to invest in terms of social capitals, and we will be in form of subsidy. And people don't really like to hear about subsidy in this part of the world, but to keep our system working. For example, in telemedicine, you don't really need to go to the hospital to see your doctor, but it's going to consume our data. But somehow we find a balance. There are so many things that we used to do that we have to be physically present, might not necessarily be too necessary, that we should be able to communicate. And what that means is that government will have to invest into internet facility infrastructure, so that people can have interaction to take care of their day-to-day living without actually being there physically. Let me just round up. Now, in terms of suggestion, we need to rethink the way we plan our cities, because it's for real. This thing will not leave us as quickly as we think. Polio is still with us. So we need to rethink the way we plan our cities in such a way that our city will be resilient and be able to adapt to changes. Our cities should not be rigid, too rigid, the way we do our master plans. Our master plan should be able, our land usage should be able to respond to changes. In the area of infrastructure, I've mentioned that we need to do more investments on online infrastructure. People will have to use more of their personal cars. More vehicles will be required because of physical distances. Many people will now have to patronize taxis. Then our terminals, either airports, terminal, rail terminal, and bus stops, we need to reconfigure them. And any area where we have crowds, like churches, like shopping malls, so that people can have spaces where they can queue and obeying the standard physical distancing. And I can see a situation where people will now embrace alternative means of vehicles in terms of moving around, like motorcycles. And unfortunately, again, in many developing countries, our roads are not designed to take care of the use of motorcycles, the use of bicycles. But these are the new realities that really have to adapt our cities, especially new areas, new cities or new estates, so that they can comply with this basic need of the new reality of social distancing. I think I have to stop here. I've been warned several times that I should stop. Thank you very much. And I will actually
Thank you very much, sir, for your very enlightening presentation. Thank you very much. We appreciate it. In short, you talked about the need, so the fact that COVID-19 will bring about innovations. After all, several things even brought about the development of planning. For example, you said that Industrial Revolution led to the discovery of small town planning. Perhaps COVID-19 will, of course, bring some new initiatives into planning. Thank you, sir. We'll go to our next presenter very, very fast. He's an architect, Professor Martin Bryant of the School of Architecture, Faculty of Design, Architecture and Building at the University of Technology in Sydney, Australia. Quickly, we'll go back. We'll ask Professor Bryant to make his presentation now. Are you with us, Prof? Okay. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you. Can I share the screen, please?
Okay.
Can you allow me to share screen?
You can share your screen, sir.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Can you see that?
Yes, sir, we can see it.
So the title says Healthy Neighbourhoods Post-COVID-19. You can see that? Good. Thank you very much for having me here. I'm sitting in Sydney, Australia, which is on this map here, right down in the bottom right-hand corner over here. And you're over in Nigeria, which is right over on the other end of the earth from me over there. You can see I've set this drawing up so that these other globs of coronavirus, which are heading towards the earth there. And we have this big question whether they're going to eat us up or whether we're going to defy them or whether we're going to learn to live with them. One of the most important epidemiologists in the world, a guy called Frank Snowden, he's an emeritus professor from Yale, he said that pandemics are what we have ordered. In other words, they're not random events. We set up our world to let pandemics happen. So COVID-19 was always going to happen. And it was going to happen because microbes selectively expand and diffuse themselves to explore ecological niches that human beings have created. Pandemics, therefore, reflect our relationships with the environment, the built environment that we create, and the natural environment that responds. So, as evidence of this, and as some of our other speakers have mentioned, in the cholera epidemic of the Industrial Revolution, cholera found pathways around the world because human beings created those pathways. Enormous cities with extraordinary overcrowding, no sanitary infrastructure, no sewage, people living on top of each other, and the most ghastly hygienic situation. The conditions were perfect for nourishing and flourishing the diseases like typhoid and cholera that are transmitted through the oral fecal cycle. One of the responses that the state put together after the cholera was to build sewers and fresh water systems. It was essential, but it was kind of a paternalistic solution. We'll take, in other words, the rulers and the leaders were saying, we'll take the problem away from you so you don't have to see it or smell it and you won't get sick. And while that's a good way of making sure that everyone stays healthy, it has a problem in that it takes decision-making away from people. The people don't know how to respond in a crisis because it's all invisible and underground. In subsequent pandemics, like the Spanish flu, the same sort of thinking happened where, okay, we'll work out how to deal with this. And 50 million people died in the Spanish flu. And the urgent piece of urban infrastructure was not sewers anymore. It was hospital and care centres, which used to be located around the edge of towns, in spas and in country resorts. But now they realise that, we need to build them into the centre of the town. The outcome of this is, as described in this article from the Guardian, that the Spanish flu actually helped to create modern welfare states. We started to become reliant on hospitals and all the care, etc., coming from institutions. And it left us with a point where, well, this is very good because it makes us generally healthier, which is great, but it doesn't give us really resilience to survive when new things keep appearing. So the question is, what do we do in our current situation 100 years later? In 2020, it appears to me that the most important piece of infrastructure that we're dealing with now with COVID is not sewers and it's not hospitals, but it's open space. So we, as people, as human beings on the planet, seek out open space in all sorts of different ways now because we realise how important it is for our health. Even if it's a point where we have to put circles on the ground and book open space as if it's a restaurant table. And we seek open spaces in other places which we never thought we'd use, like on the rooftops, whatever we can find. So open space has become incredibly important in what we do. It's also found ways in which we find places where we can collaborate with community on something that makes life expressive, enjoyable, etc. So open space has taken on a whole new role in all of what we're doing. And what that means is that what's becoming very important to us is that we are now wanting to live in livable neighbourhoods that matter for our well-being. So the idea that open space keeps us healthy and it keeps us sane. So resilient, walkable and self-sufficient communities are being shaped in COVID-19's wake. Community matters, as does the neighbourhood we live in. The upshot is that healthier in the 21st century is going to be about having a healthy neighbourhood. But there are two issues which affect our post-COVID-19 world. Two issues have surfaced at the same time as COVID around the world. And while there may not be a causal link between them, they are inevitably linked. One, of course, is the Black Lives Matter movement. And this shows to a large extent the fact that, well, actually, while we do want to be in neighbourhoods, we are actually caring people. We do have concern for others. And part of that is a necessity, because we know that what affects one person anywhere affects everyone else everywhere. And we're inevitably part of a species. So caring, looking after others, has become a necessity for us. And so what we are starting to learn is that it's not just the COVID itself, it's the other things that are happening around COVID about how we are coming together as human beings, which is very positive, and harks back to what one of the previous Professor Incoom said about the opportunities that we have in front of us. So they're not all bad, the things that are coming out of COVID. The other very positive thing that's coming out of COVID is the fact that we're now witnessing a world that is getting cleaner. We're not getting in planes, and we're not using cars as much. So COVID doesn't have a direct relationship with the quality of the environment, but it actually does have a relationship with the environment, because the two of them are happening together, COVID and a cleaner environment, which means that the problems that we had previously, which were associated with climate crises, we might actually, by going in a different route, actually start to create ways in which we can solve some of those climate problems. And obviously the inequalities which the Black Lives Matter movement has uncovered and made really obvious that everyone is really concerned for that, they're also something which are becoming obvious. And if we can start to sort out those inequalities, we'll do what Frank Snowden has said, is we'll start to create a world where it's not so comfortable for an epidemic to start, because the clearing out those kinds of problems will make it more a better place for all of us to live. So what I'm going to suggest is that the world in which we are at the moment is different from the world of the 19th and the 18th century and the pandemics that happened there, because there the pandemics were solved by singular solutions, by health, by sewers, by putting hospitals around the place. Whereas now we've got a more complex world where we need to have health and equality and culture and society all linked together, and the whole lot being framed by the environment. So COVID's not sitting there alone. It's actually part of a bigger movement that we're all part of. That means that we have to start to think in slightly different ways as urban planners. So on the left-hand side here, we see a picture of a city where I used to live in Wellington, which is in New Zealand. And we see the way it's usually drawn is with all the buildings covered in black. What I've drawn here on the right-hand side is the reverse of that, where all the open space is covered in black. In other words, the black is what's the most important here, and the black is what comes forward. We don't worry so much anymore in the future. We should be starting to think of new ways of thinking so that we can start to address some of the real issues which perhaps are covered in the open space areas of the world. Meanwhile, in the buildings of the world, we've got all sorts of problems which have already been mentioned by a couple of the previous speakers here. One of them being that office space and retail malls are dwindling. And we've got all these buildings which we need to start to think as urban planners what we need to do with. But we're very good at adapting and being agile, as one of the other professors at Adiran had talked about. Being agile was really important. We need to be agile about how we use all these buildings which we don't need anymore. And we now need bigger homes, as someone else has mentioned, to accommodate our home offices and our offices for our children to go to school in. So we need to reorganise our spaces, the white spaces in our cities, and put more attention into our open spaces. We've already heard about how density is still an issue. We can't live without density, because density provides us with all the money. Only when we start to get people living close together can we afford all the infrastructure, which is the hospitals and the sewers, to make places safe places to live. So we still need to have density, but we also need to have with it open space, which allows people to do all sorts of different things in different types of open space. There's a project that I worked on in Sydney just recently where we started to look at open space in a different way. This is a residential development for about 2,000 people in Sydney. And what we were interested in is getting sunlight and water and fresh water and ventilation to all the houses in Sydney. And what we realised was that you can't look at these things at one scale. You need to start to look at them at lots of scales. So we looked at the parks at a detailed scale, and this development like this at this scale, and how it fit in the whole of the city at this scale. So this ability to be able to look at different scales all at once And the other thing we realised, we had to look at a different time frame. So in the winter, it looked like that. In the summer, when it was wetter, it looked like that. So we had to start to examine how these places work. So it gives us a different way of looking at urban planning when these things happen. So it meant that what we were doing was overlapping systems. So we no longer can just put wetlands and forests and so on the edge of town. We actually have to bring them into the city. So this is a design for that suburb where all the systems of the wetland and the landscape are being put into the middle of the medium density development that happen in the town itself. So it allows all the water systems, etc., to happen through that. And what we want to do out of this is, more than anything, get people to understand their environment that they're in. We have spent a century pulling people out of the country and putting them into cities where they no longer have concern for their landscape and their environment. And we now need to create these places again where people can start to read their landscape, read their environment, and understand what's happening. And that is one of the benefits that might come out of COVID and its relationship to the climate crisis and the Black Lives Matter movement, is that we will start to become a better and more sensitive world. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir, for your presentation. Yeah, I took from the fact that, from what you said that we're in a more complex world, and that, of course, because the world is so complex now, we have to come up with complex solutions to this pandemic and how to manage the pandemic. In light of the fact that it's going to be with us for quite some time. Thank you very much, sir. Our time is fast spent. We're going to our next presenter, our next panelist. His name is Architect Ladi Lewis. He's a fellow of the Nigerian Institute of Architects. He's of the ASC Design Consultants. He's in Lagos. He was a former chairman of the Lagos chapter of the NIA. And he's going to speak to us next now. Hello, architects. Are you with us, sir? Hello? Hello?
Hello?
Dr. Blues. Yeah, hello, yes. I can hear you,
Hello.
sir. Hello, sir.
I can hear you.
Okay, yeah.
I can hear you, sir.
And I can see you too.
Okay.
Go ahead, please. You have 10 minutes, sir.
Okay. I'm trying to see if I could share my screen.
You can share your screen, sir. Go ahead.
Okay. Is it showing?
No, not yet.
No.
Yes, it's showing now.
Okay. Okay. I'm trying to get to my slides. Is it? You can see it.
We can see your screen.
Yes, we can.
Okay. So this is my presentation on the COVID-19 and urban planning, issues, challenges, new normal and pathways. A lot of eminent people have spoken, and so I just want to acknowledge them, and I will probably skip through what they have said before. My name is Architect Ladi Lewis. I'm an architect based here in Lagos. The introduction is basic. It's been done before, repeatedly today about the new pandemic we have and its impact. We know it's a virus, and it's something that has repeated itself, in various forms in the past. So it's not new. We've had the SARS and the MERS, and we've had recurring history of these pandemics. Now, what are the issues? We have the health risk. We have the issues of isolation. We have the issue of treatment. We have the issues of deaths. We have the issues of economy, how it affects the economy and business, social behavior, impact on urban high density, slums and ghettos. Now, coronavirus, we know how it spreads through droplets and through coughs and saliva and discharges from, so we know its impact on the environment in terms of how it spreads. So what is the new normal? We're seeing people wearing face masks, 6 distances, touching of surfaces becomes an issue. We need to avoid large groups is the new normal. We're seeing virtual communications we're doing. We're seeing package deliveries. The rise of the courier companies is something that's showing now. And we're seeing takeout food. It's going to affect the urban setting. Now, sanitization protocols all around us is also an impact of the new normal. Now, what are the challenges? We have to deal with personal health implications. We have to live with it, living with it. We have to look at the cost implications in terms of the pandemic. Then social-cultural implications, as someone had said, over cultural ceremonies and meeting together. We have to look at the existing infrastructure in the urban center. How this is going to be a challenge to urban design. Our existing urban transportation is also an issue. How does it impact us? Our hospital facilities, and then mental health, its impact is a challenge. Now, I'm going to go into the pathways and the new protocols. I'll list quite a bit of them. And then start to look at how it affects us all. Now, social behavior is going to change. The way we greet and we meet. We now greet with the elbow. We now have to have new design parameters for urban design. And we need to have walkable streets. We need to look at desanitizing protocols at building entrances with health checks. That will be a new building format that we might need to have in our buildings. We have to now develop new design tools and virtual design applications. But now we are going to probably rely more on them. Our buildings will have physical distancing protocols. Contactless, they are there. Working from home buildings with mixed-use components with enclosed, controlled, and contained environments like space stations. People actually put some time these buildings. Factory modular construction methodology in the physical development of our cities will now start to have impact on us. We might want to build in factories where we can control the environment and keep it clean and also speed up the quality of what we do. Yes, we're already building factory-built modular construction buildings, but this now could become the future. We might start to see the future of urban roofs, urban roof farms, and vertical urban farming. They are future technology. Use our air-conditioned environments with virus filtration systems will now in the remote working conditions. Do construction in case we already exist on the impact on architecture design and even in the practice as we are seeing this sanitary.
Hello? Hello, is there?
There's network to you. I think we've lost him.
Okay. Okay, okay. Until we get him again, can we just continue? We actually have less than 20 minutes left for this webinar. Perhaps we should just quickly have some discussions. We can raise our hands if you have anything to say. Meanwhile, I'll go to the chat section and read out what some concerns were expressed. For example, Nathaniel Atebija says that the whole essence of physical planning is to ensure pleasant, healthy, and economic environment.
Hello, sir.
Hello, is it linked up?
We have two people who are ready to ask questions.
Okay, have you raised their hand? Okay, I'll see.
Yeah, so I want to unmute the first person.
Okay.
Some.
Okay.
Some. Go ahead and ask your question. Unmute yourself. Nedusong, unmute yourself. You can go ahead and ask your question, please.
Well, good day, everyone. I never actually raised my hand to ask any question, but I have something in my mind bothering me about let's take, for instance, Lagos State. Let's assume that the light vehicle thing that one of the discussants put forward, that there's need for people to travel maybe within their own vehicles, which makes it safer for them individuals. How do we implement this? Or maybe if there are some vehicles that we see now in Europe that just take one person at a time, more like a mono car. Do we have provisions for such things in Lagos? How do we actually re-engineer Lagos State?
Hello.
For instance, a typical city. How do we make it work in view of all this, the implication of this COVID-19? Thank you.
Hello?
Hello? Did you hear what I said, sir?
Okay, are you saying that do we have provisions for what, sir? I missed that.
Well, like I said earlier, I was just thinking in my mind. I didn't actually raise my hand for anything. I didn't even unmute, but I just said, how do we re-engineer Lagos, a typical city like Lagos, to accommodate the solutions that are being profiled here? Maybe meanwhile, whereby people are likely to move on in their private vehicle, a mono vehicle, the vehicle that can take just one person, which most of the time they are compact. What kind of a provision can we make in Lagos to make it work? A city that will accommodate everybody, even if you decide to go alone in your mono vehicle, or maybe jog, or maybe use a bicycle, looking at the very fact that presently we don't even have such accommodation.
Okay,
thank you.
I think Professor Oduwaye said something similar to that in his presentation.
Yes.
Some things that can come up. I don't know, Professor, you want to attend to that quickly?
I can respond to that. It's already happening.
Okay, sir.
It's already happening. Now, we have regulations and we have government agencies actually monitoring people in terms of density of people in different types of vehicles. For example, in personal cars, you shouldn't have, beside the driver, one person, then the seats behind the driver, maximum of 2. That's a legislative control. That's a legislative control. It's the same thing for taxis, anything that is car. You shouldn't have 3 people or more than 2 people sitting along a road. And I think that's a form of control. The same thing with minibuses. At least in Lagos, I reside in Lagos. And that is what is happening. You just have to get used to it. The issue is the implication of that on the cost of journey. For example, going to work. I can only take 1 passenger in Lagos and pay double the fare. That is what is happening currently. I think that's the initial prices we have to pay. At the stage, there will be level up. There will be what is of an acceptable way that people will be ready to pay, and people operating that type of vehicles too, because they have to still be in business. There will be a balance somewhere. But health is too critical that whatever it's going to cost us to prevent us to get into this pandemic is really worth it. Thank you.
Abdullahi Anofi, you can unmute yourself and ask your question. Abdullahi Anofi, please. Unmute yourself.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah, we can hear you.
And thanks for the lovely presentation thus far. Please, my question has to do with how to deal with the slum communities. If indeed we intend to provide avenue to solve some of these problems that have emerged as a result of COVID-19, and we know the peculiarities of the slum communities, how in practical terms can we enable new measures in order to forestall future reoccurrence in the slum communities? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I think Professor Wade spoke along that line.
Yes.
Can you reply? I think. Okay.
Yes. You see, my problem with the way we are seeing this whole COVID-19 pandemic and what it is doing and how urban planners should react is that traditionally for us in this country, we have planned for less than 5% of the population. The bulk of the population in all our urban centers live in these informal settlements where there are no defined strict structures to begin with. So before you are thinking about providing very decent forms of public transport and so on, the first thing is to get to base with those communities. People have lived in those communities for years. They have ideas about how they want their communities to be improved. In that case, you tap into their indigenous knowledge. Secondly, you don't come to such communities coming from top down. You want to reach out to them and involve them in whatever it is that you want to do with them. Planning, after all, is about people. And then when you engage with them, you begin to see the ways, avenues in which you can improve. But there must be an incremental approach. You cannot, for instance, you cannot decide you are going to relocate all the people in some of these, there are over 300,000 people, and then plan the communities and bring them back. Of course, with reduction in densities, you cannot even do that. But incrementally, you can have an action plan that seeks to do it what you can do there, then over time, it will all come together. But the important thing is that the people themselves must own the process, not government. Because all these fine ideas we have from books, when it comes to local people, you may find that very few of those ideas will really work. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. The next person.
The next person is Musbao Omakin Jalili. Please kindly unmute yourself and ask your question. Unmute yourself, please.
Hello, hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, we can hear you, sir.
Okay, good afternoon. And I want to say thank you to all the presenters. So my question is in the area of informal settlement, which I think the last person spoke about now. But the angle from which I want us to see it is, we have been talking about the use of indigenous knowledge system. Yes, it's fine. Then we also talk about having an action plan to address or that will be targeted towards these communities. Fine. But it is much more than saying having an action plan or making use of indigenous knowledge system. But again, there is this problem of poverty. Most people that live in overcrowded communities may not necessarily be interested in living in those communities where you have slums, but because of the factor of poverty that make them to reside there. And if you look at the urban setting in Africa, the urbanization process is largely informal in nature because of the problem of poverty and perhaps because of the problem, because of our cultural orientation. So we need to actually think and focus our planning on how to address the problem of informality in a way that we'll be able to have an environment that will be okay, that will be adequate, so that we can maintain all the distancing and other ideas that we have mentioned. Now, if we then say we want to have a proper urban planning, then we begin to think about, we will look at some of these standards that we talk about. We may have to look at them again. Then the process of saying that, the process of having a development, land and property development and the likes, we have to look at them again in order to accommodate those in the informal sector and the poor people in a way that will make our plans to work. So I think what I'm trying to say in essence is we need to refocus our planning on addressing the problems of informal neighborhoods and poor communities. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Yeah, it's a very naughty issue.
We have
informal settlements leading to this pandemic.
We have Kehinde Oluwatosin. Please, you can unmute yourself and ask your question or contribution. Kehinde Oluwatosin.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Very good. Very good presentation by everyone. It's very interesting to see how we're dealing with COVID in different parts of Nigeria, different parts of the world. I suppose my question is, I come from a design background, and my question is, a lot of people talked about master plan, action plan, and local area plans. Why haven't we in Nigeria, haven't we done a lot of these plans? What is stopping us from preparing this plan so that the issues of informal settlement, the issues of the way we move around, the issues of our social distancing, having regards to the urban development goals of the UN Habitat agenda. So all this has to go in place in its sort of plan. So what are the mechanisms in different parts of Nigeria that we're using to progress this? It's a big question that we need to kind of address, because if we don't start that discussion, if we don't start that piece of exercise to move forward in terms of planning in our locality, in our states, in our countries, it will be very, very difficult to sell the agenda of planning to our public officials, to our governors, even the people. Because it's very good, we're talking within ourselves, we're planners, we understand the rules, we understand the principles and models of planning. But it's not about us. It's about the local people trying to make better lives for themselves.
Correct.
How do we use planning as a tool to drive that? Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next person is Mr. Rashid Oshinawa. Quickly, we have to round up this webinar by 2:15. Quickly, please. Hello?
Hello?
Mr. Oshinawa, is it there? Mr. Oshinawa, Rashid Oshinawa, can you unmute yourself and make your statement?
All right. Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
I really want to appreciate all our speakers so far. They've done very well, and I've really gained a lot. But my little contribution will be, I want to throw the line of the previous speakers. I mean, the immediate speaker just before this, the last one, in that as other urban planners, there is, with COVID, I think we need to look at the issue of space. I think it's very, very key in our urban centers, the way and that is why I want to also the deputy VC who has also mentioned something about in that corridor about informality. So we also, I think it's very, very key now, because we are talking about space, and we need to redesign the way we manage space. And at the same time, what the architect also showed in terms of the recreational areas where you have circle all over, all these things, I think we need to put everything into play. Then I also want to add one thing in terms of the one thing I see very, very coming up frequently in terms of this period we are in terms of pandemic, is the issue of the world is now getting more connected, and we can see that we now share information globally, and this has never been before, if not for the issue of a pandemic. I really appreciate everyone. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have just a few minutes to end this webinar. And to round up, I want each of the speakers they have just 1 minute to make the final comments. Just 1 minute each. We'll start with Professor Income, please.
All right, thank you very much.
Okay, sir.
Just to say thank you very much once again. Thank you to all the speakers and those who have made contributions. I just want to emphasize that the pandemic provides planning a great opportunity to make impact. We should therefore take advantage of the opportunity and see how best we can re-engineer our communities for a better future. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Town Planner Adediran, are you still there, sir? Adediran. I think he's no longer with us. Professor Wade.
Yes, please.
Yeah, 1 minute. Final comment, sir, madam. Hello. Hello. Hello, madam. Are you there?
Madam, unmute yourself.
Unmute yourself.
My take is this.
Okay.
Cities in sub-Saharan Africa, Nigeria included, we must address informality, informal settlements, because they are the biggest settlement issue we have in our cities. The city or the nation that gets it right will get urban planning right. I admire the beautiful ideas that we continuously get in sharing with the rest of the world. But those ideas just take care of a minute percentage of the urban population. The bulk of the urban population is in informal settlements. And we need, as planners in Nigeria, to really look at it, to brainstorm and see how we can develop indigenous strategies for dealing with them. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. We'll go to Professor Oduwaye. Are you still with us, sir?
Yeah, I think, yeah, thanks very much.
Yeah, just 1 minute of final take, sir.
I think the issue is still that we are not planning in this country. We are not planning as planning. Embrace physical planning like in Lagos State, for example. Maybe Abuja, even though the plan is, I can't recollect any. You can fix your planning. That is the planning, urban planning of your cities. Most of these shocks, urban planning will foresee them while they were on trying to prepare the plans. But for our policymakers, legislators, the executive arm of government to appreciate the need to do physical planning, I think that is the beginning of the problem. And I hope there will be a way, and maybe God will minister on them to appreciate the need to do town planning. We are not doing town planning in this country, and that is the real issue. But planning will really create rooms for emergencies, for shocks, and we have not been doing that. It is quite unfortunate. And we can't run away from it. I think we can't run away. Because what we will invest to do, to treat the consequences of planning will be more than the cost of actually engaging in planning.
Thank you, sir. I will go to Town Planner Adediran now with us.
Yes.
Yeah, just 1 minute. Your take home, sir. Just 1 minute. Hello. Can you unmute yourself? Town Planner Adediran. Please unmute yourself and talk to him. Hello. Our case is not with us.
Yes.
We'll go over to. We'll go to Professor Bryant, please. Prof, are you still with us? Professor Bryant?
Yes. He should unmute himself.
Thank you very much. You've just unmuted.
Okay.
Thank you very much. And
I'll give us a final take home, sir. 1 minute.
I fully appreciate the enormity of the issues associated with informal settlements, and I'm sorry I have no experience or expertise in that area, but I fully appreciate that's one of the great problems that Nigeria faces and lots of other countries in the world face. My only comment really is that we can tackle this problem together with climate. Climate is the other real problem that we face in the Pacific. All indigenous nations in the Pacific are very concerned about the issues with climate, and I'm hoping that with COVID and how we address COVID, how we become more aware of our environment, we start to address those issues of climate as well. Thank you. Thank you very much for inviting me.
Thank you very much, sir. You're welcome. Is there Antampana Adediran with us now? Looks like it's not, but it's like Architect Lewis is back.
Yeah, you
hello, sir.
Oh.
Yeah, you know what? You just.
Hello.
Okay. Let's take Antampana Adediran, please.
Earlier, the host refused to unmute me, so I think I'm now ready. I have to thank everybody and then quickly respond to the issue of master plan and other levels of plans. I think the root cause of this challenge is about the governance system, particularly in this part of the world. Most of these plans supposed to come from the local government, particularly action area plans and at times structure plan. But in a situation where you have states having to do everything, and some of these states, they don't really also get it right, particularly now that we have a democratic system, which they see the master plan as just pieces of paper, and they start cutting people's house and claiming they are doing urban renewal. So we will probably need to work on our governance and system of government in this area. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir. We'll go to Architect Lewis. Considering the fact that your presentation was cut short in between, you just round up and give us your final take home. Architect Lewis, please.
Well, my final take home. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I can hear you, sir.
Hello.
Yes, we
can hear you.
The architect is part of the team, that forms the urban design team, and one of the things that's in our urban setting is that there has to be a lot of work done in changing the way we address the urban environment. There are design proposals that need to be put in place. We need to make our more workable. Upgrade. It's paramount that we look at new technology and use them in our urban environments. We need to look at cities. We do not have mixed within a short distance of where they live and work. We need to work on, and it's going to be a partnership of public sector, and the public has to be willing, and be prepared for urban renewal. The resistance to it is always also a major problem. We need to be able to look at the Singapore example, where in 1960, third world country, and in 50 years, becoming first world, renewing their slums and turning them into first world cities. So it's an opportunity, it's a possibility, and I believe that we can do it if we work together. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you, everyone. We've been at this for the past 2 hours, over 2 hours now, and we have to round up. I want to thank everybody that made that time to honor our invitation to attend this webinar. We shared a lot, and we hope that all our discussions, all our postulations, our recommendations shall be presented to the authorities, and they shall listen to us, and we make a headway concerning this pandemic. And we also ensure that as planners, we ensure that we set up processes and ensure that our profession works in a way that will ensure inclusiveness, flexibility, and robustness in mind. We're running up now. Professor Duai, you have any final thing to say, sir?
Thank you very much. I want to really thank every one of us. Maybe let me acknowledge the presence of the president of the Nigerian Institute of Town Planners, Lequot, Ezuta, and then the first national vice president, Tamplana Aide, and the second national vice president, Tamplana Atu Bike. They are all on. My friend at the Federal Ministry of Works, our eminent person, Lady Edna Tubi, Federal Ministry of Works too, is on. Tamplana Diabo from Ibadan. My prof at Akure, Federal University of Technology, Professor Felix Omole, Professor Abdullahi, then Tamplana Diko. Ashiru too, we really thank you, Taufik Salah from the University of Lagos, and many more that I may not be able to mention. I think this is the beginning of the debates that we really have to put our hearts together, build environments, and really resolve the issues surrounding COVID-19. If not, our designs or our proposal will not work if we don't come into realities of COVID-19. Because COVID-19 is not going to leave us. It's going to take very long time. So definitely we have to really rethink and do in-depth research on how to live with it as soon as it's fine with us. Thank you very much and welcome.
Thank you very much, sir. We have come to the end of this webinar. Thank you for joining us. Bye-bye, everyone.